The sauce hits the grill last. The label matters first. Two BBQ sauces can look almost identical on the shelf. Same smoky promise, same summer feeling, same dark, glossy color. But the back label may tell a completely different story. We spend all this time picking the perfect cut of meat, but how often do we actually look at what we're slathering all over it? I like to think of it this way. A barbecue sauce bottle is basically a summer postcard, right? The front of the bottle is this glossy, picture-perfect postcard, selling you a specific vibe. It's promising you a backyard cookout, some pitmaster's legacy, or a classic regional tradition. But if you flip that postcard over, well, the back label contains the fine print. And that fine print is the actual mechanism of what is quietly being added to every single plate. It's a detail that honestly so many of us completely overlook. And this right here is the common buying mistake we pretty much all make. We're grabbing bottles based on cool brand design, flavor claims, or just that warm summer marketing right on the front. Meanwhile, we're entirely missing the actual reality on the back label. Depending on the label, you might find significant amounts of added sugar, insights into corporate ownership that completely dictate ingredient quality, or even the use of artificial colors designed to just make the sauce look like barbecue sauce. So remember, the front is marketing, the back is the mechanism. Okay, let's get into decoding the fine print, starting with serving size and sugar. Now, what's really interesting here is the number 4. If you look on the back of almost every bottle, the nutrition panel claims a standard serving size of just 2 tablespoons. But think about your last cookout. A realistic pour when you're actually coating a rack of ribs or tossing a few pieces of chicken, that's going to be much closer to 4 tablespoons. And that fundamentally changes the math you're looking at on the back of that bottle. So what happens when we do that realistic math? Well, if you pour a realistic 4 tablespoons of the best-selling brand in America, that delivers 32 grams of added sugar. Let's put that into perspective for a second. The American Heart Association's entire daily recommended limit for most women is gone before the meat even finishes cooking, literally before the first side dish even hits the table. You might be wondering, how does all that sugar hide in plain sight? Well, it's through a practice known as the split sweetener technique. See, the FDA allows manufacturers to list different forms of the same sweetener as totally separate ingredients. This means one massive sugar load can be legally split into smaller-looking individual entries on the ingredient panel. By doing this, the sweetening agents get pushed much further down the ingredient list, buried exactly where most shoppers just stop reading. Let's see how this actually plays out with the heavy hitters. Sweet Baby Ray's legitimately earned its credibility in a 1985 Chicago basement, and today it absolutely dominates the market. We're talking over 40% of the American barbecue sauce market. It outsells its next 7 competitors combined. But its current massive scale means the front label carries the memory of its authentic origins forward, while the actual formula inside the bottle has drifted significantly since the founders sold it to a salad dressing company back in 2005. Just check out their current ingredient panel. It relies heavily on that split sweetener technique we just talked about. You'll find 5 distinct forms of sugar here. High fructose corn syrup is the very first ingredient, followed by regular corn syrup separately, then pineapple juice concentrate, molasses, and sugar. 5 distinct ways to write sweetener on a single panel. And functionally, when these 5 sweeteners hit a hot grill, they reach caramelization temperature incredibly fast, scorching into a burnt candy shell way before the meat underneath actually has time to properly cook. So what's really going on behind the best sellers? Let's take a look at the corporate mechanics. Casey Masterpiece is a classic staple, right? But for 30 years, this sauce was actually a line item inside a bleach company's portfolio, specifically Clorox. And the current formulation relies on dual corn sweetener entries. On the grill, this creates a sugary glaze that essentially chars away the intended classic Kansas City tang. In fact, it leaves a lot of long-term buyers cutting it with apple cider vinegar just to make it usable. And this brilliantly illustrates how corporate margins dictate our ingredients. Take Bullseye, which is owned by Kraft Heinz. If you buy this exact same brand and bottle in Canada, it's made with real sugar. But cross the border into the United States, the first ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. Now, this wasn't changed for American taste preferences. It was changed because high fructose corn syrup costs less in the U.S. due to federal corn subsidies. American buyers simply get the cheaper ingredient in the exact same packaging. Crazy, right? Kraft Original actually tells an even more documented story of corporate mechanics. Back in 2015, Kraft made this highly publicized written promise to remove high fructose corn syrup and, do better. But by 2019, Kraft Heinz announced a massive $15.4 billion write-down. That was basically a federal acknowledgement that gutting ingredient quality had massively impacted their own company's value. And today, if you check a bottle of Kraft Original, the old formula came back, silently. high fructose corn syrup is the #1 ingredient again. Both the 2015 promise and the current ingredient list are just sitting there, live online simultaneously. Then we have brands that kind of rely on visuals over substance. Take Jack Daniel's. They charge a premium, implying this authentic Tennessee heritage and whiskey flavor. But the reality? It's produced at a facility in Ohio, not Tennessee. And the whiskey is listed so far down the panel that whatever alcohol survives processing is pretty much negligible. You're tasting a font, not a barrel. Meanwhile, Open Pit relies on cosmetic caramel coloring just to visually qualify as BBQ sauce, compensating for a formula where high fructose corn syrup is the very first ingredient.
All right, let's pivot and look at the transparent alternatives out there.
First up is Stubb's Original. Honestly, this is probably the easiest, most accessible upgrade in the grocery store. It has a real tomato and vinegar base, no high fructose corn syrup, and no caramel coloring. What's actually remarkable here is that McCormick purchased the brand for $100 million in 2015 and showed the discipline to leave a working recipe alone. It builds real bark on the grill and delivers a really honest, peppery profile. Now, if blood sugar or cardiovascular health is a consideration for you, G. Hughes may definitely deserve some attention. A caterer from Ohio built this brand into a $50 million a year business by recognizing a massive gap in the market. He used sucralose to create a barbecue sauce with 0 added sugar and 0 net carbs. So while legacy brands loaded up on corn syrup, G. Hughes captured the market for buyers managing dietary restrictions who still wanted a sauce that performs well on the grill without scorching. Primal Kitchen takes a totally whole food approach. Just look at this ingredient list: balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, date paste, and fig solids. It's using real foods for sweetness and fiber, caramelizing gradually on the grill. Now, it is worth noting that Kraft Heinz, yep, the same company behind several brands we discussed earlier, acquired Primal Kitchen for $200 million back in 2019. However, the clean formula has held up, mainly because altering it would destroy the organic and Whole30 certifications that actually justify its premium price tag. Finally, we have independent champions like Lily's Q and Bone Suckin' Sauce. These are family recipes that haven't been handed over to corporate acquisition teams. Lily's Q relies on a Carolina apple cider vinegar backbone that penetrates the meat rather than just sitting on top of it as a sugary shell. And Bone Suckin' Sauce, which has been owned by the same family since 1992, uses real honey and molasses. No chemical thickening agents, no correction additives, just ingredients your mother would actually recognize. So, how do we put this all together for your next grocery run? Here's a super practical checklist for you. First, check the serving sizes. Do the math against a realistic 4-tablespoon pour. Second, read the very first ingredient. Is it tomato and vinegar, or is it corn syrup? Third, look really closely for split sweeteners hiding multiple forms of sugar across the label. And fourth, check for cosmetic additions like caramel coloring, which are often just there to compensate for a lack of real ingredients. When you get right down to it, this entire explainer comes down to one simple habit: flipping the bottle over. The front labels are written by marketing departments to protect the brand and sell you a summer feeling. But reading past them, into the fine print of the nutrition label, well, that's how you protect yourself. So the next time you're standing there in the condiment aisle, ask yourself, what story is the back of your favorite summer postcard really telling?